Hi, my name is Jerry with Christian Preppers, and as you've seen from the title, I can't tell the truth about what I've seen, and that is the really sad reality to life. Is that even if we go places and we do things and we pick up some insight, we often can't share it. And the surprising part is that it's actually your own side. It's my community that would have the greatest problems with it. The other side, it doesn't matter what you say. They'll just label you and call you all kinds of names anyway. You don't even have to say anything for them. I mean, just even this T-shirt would get me labeled by the other side. So it's not about that. It's our own community, and that's the really sad part. Is coming back and sharing some of the experiences that I've had. It's just created such crazy division, even with my own community, to the point where some people don't even really want to engage me anymore. They think that I got indoctrinated when I left or whatever the case is, and it's just a very, very sad reality that we live in, where if you're trying to bring about some kind of a mutual understanding, where if you don't embrace your side like 100%, like it's as if your side can never do anything wrong. So if you point out some things that, it's like, hey, well, this is not our Christian calling, and that's not really the way that the Bible would describe it. People don't really want you saying that. They think that if you direct any negativity, that it really, really helps the other side. And I disagree. I think that us being sharp and iron sharpening iron and having all the impurities, refined away from us through engagement and conversation, and by saying, hey, why are we doing this, so to speak, it's not feeding the other side, it's making us better. But even in the stories that I've told, I get rejected and then labeled by some people as being anti this or pro this or whatever craziness is. And it's like, hey, I'm just trying to tell you what I've seen, and I, maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I seen. Maybe my perspective is wrong, but I can't deny what I seen with my own two eyes. So there's a couple of things that I'm going to talk about that are kind of taboo subjects. But before I kind of get into it, what I wanted to do is just kind of share where part of this perspective kind of came from, as far as growing up and living in a community that was divided. So we had the Irish Catholics on one side and the British Protestants on the other side, and how it was actually my own community. And don't get me wrong, I was in danger, like physical danger, from going into like a British Protestant neighborhood, where absolutely they could have and would have hurt me if the opportunity had presented itself. So you have to have serious situational awareness growing up in Belfast, making sure you are very aware of where you are and that you know how to get home and how to get out of the area you're in if it's not a great area, so to speak. So So there are those dangers for sure when I was growing up, but there was dangers of me literally getting kicked out of my own community, and I want to share a story to try to give some light to that. So as I said, grew up in a Irish Catholic community in Belfast. So I was essentially growing up through the 70s and 80s, and towards the end of the 80s, I had started getting involved in cross community projects, where I would get involved with, just these programs where we would go to different places with Protestant kids. And what was kind of cool is, even though we were essentially attacking each other, when I say we, I mean the proverbial we. I mean, I wasn't personally, and these kids that I was away with probably weren't there. It was just our communities were attacking and even killing each other, and essentially engaged in a guerrilla style sort of underground civil war. When we went away, all the labels, fell off, and we just got to see the human side of other people. And in some cases, it was kind of crazy. So when I went away, like a lot of the young Catholic men that I was away with, they're away from their parents and they started drinking. And of course, if you're Irish, that's when you go somewhere, one of the first things that you try to figure out is how to get alcohol. So for a lot of these young men, that's what they were trying to figure out. And we were right at that age group where quite a few of us were already 18. So we were of drinking age in Ireland. And it didn't matter what country we went to, what the drinking age was there. the way that these guys felt was, hey, if I can drink at home, then I should be able to drink anywhere I go. And then that's what they pursued, was getting alcohol. Some of the Irish guys got like absolutely hammered. And honestly, they were kind of annoying to be around, you know, where some of the British kids, you know, they didn't drink that much. And you know, they had kids in their group as well that would drink a lot, and they were also obnoxious. But there was just kids that you could fall in with. And sometimes it was just the personalities. It was more engaging and a better friendship regardless of their background. So it kind of really helped a lot of us to lower our guard by actually getting to hang out with the other side. Instead of putting that label, oh, you know, the guy's Irish Catholic, I hate him, you know, and then we go away and we hang out together and they're like, oh, he's actually a pretty cool guy, you know, we can be friends. So that's kind of the environment, and people recognize that if they just get us together, we'll do better. And a lot of those programs were very successful in the north of Ireland. The one that I was on was definitely successful because a lot of us stayed in contact for even years after that. And I think it helped to actually humanize the other side. So I would say people in that group were probably a lot less likely to go back and get involved in sectarian violence. We were just probably more, you know, occupied with trying to build our own futures. So the story that I have about my own community that I couldn't really share, because I could tell the stories about the cross community stuff, that was fine. But I got into, you know, a apprenticeship for an outdoor activity center called Belfast Activity Center. And I started doing an apprenticeship there, and essentially a lot of the programs were funded and paid for. So I just started trying to get every instructor certificate I could get, just, you know, learning the discipline, getting good at it, and then becoming an instructor. So one of the things I became an instructor in was kayaking. So I became a kayak instructor. And you know, it was just a really enjoyable thing. You take young people out, you know, you're loading up the boats, you're going in the water and all that kind of stuff. So what was kind of cool about that program was we actually got to take out these Down syndrome kids. And it was probably one of the best times I ever had in that job, was taking out these Down syndrome kids. And just the joy. And it was great to take out like able-bodied kids for sure. But, you know, they got to do a lot of things. Whereas for a lot of the Down syndrome kids, like this was a really, really special event. And they were just really bursting with joy and energy to participate. So the first time we went out, we took a group out, we realized we were significantly undermanned. So we had to do things very slowly, keep people on the bank, couldn't get everybody in the water. It really limited their water time. So we decided, you know, hey, let's see if we can get a couple of volunteers. So there was two guys that I kind of met, Ian and Stuart, and they're young British Protestant guys. Not too many Irish people called Ian and Stuart. So became friends with them. And one day they brought a friend of theirs. They said, hey, we can get another couple of guys to come down and help so that we have more hands-on, so we can kind of get all the kids in the water at the same time, but, you know, have a 3 or 4 to 1 ratio per kid, so that if anything was to happen, we're right there. And it was really fun. It was fun to kind of dip them over as if they were doing an Eskimo roll, or, you know, sculling, or, you know, just keeping the boat, you know, level or whatever else. So they really enjoyed some of that big stuff that they would do that was really exciting to them. That they go back and they say, hey, you know, I got to roll the kayak or whatever the case is, and so on and so on. So great times. So we had this one group, and my two friends, Ian and Stuart, they said, hey, I got a guy coming, and the guy shows up and he's wearing a police uniform. So I'm an Irish Catholic guy. We don't call the cops. We don't get involved with the cops. We don't have anything to do with the cops. We think they're probably the most bigoted, racist organization on the face of the planet. 97.3% British Protestant when I was that age, growing up. So almost no Catholics to be found in the whole organization. So we were very, very weary of the RUC, or the Peelers as we would really call them. So we were super leery of them and anything they had to do. So here I am, you know, running this outdoor experience for these Down syndrome kids, and then this guy shows up. I'm like, so he starts taking off his uniform and getting into his wet gear. And then he comes down into the water, and I'm already like, I don't really know how to, like, how am I going to interact with this? Because there was like, right out the gate, there was like an instant dislike. I'm just being honest, right? So an instant dislike. So he comes down, and the guy is super humble. So I'm running the class, and he's just like, hey, what can I do? Where do you need me? Super nice guy. Name is Barry. He was a bit older than me, but just got in the water and just was really enjoying. I could see how much joy he was having from helping these kids and dipping them in the water and getting them back up again, and just the fun that they were kind of having. And guy was just clearly loving it. Like, he was really loving it and having a great time. So Barry kind of came out with us a few times and doing the same thing, got into conversations with him. And had I went back to my community at the time and said, hey, I'm like doing this, I'm leading this class, and one of the guys that volunteers is, an RUC, a police officer, it is possible that the people in my community would have said, you have to stop right now, and if you don't stop, you have to leave the community. Now, at no point in time did I stop becoming an Irish nationalist. At no point in time did I stop thinking that a united Ireland would be better for the whole country. And the irony of this whole situation is the interactions that I had with Barry, Ian, and Stuart was kind of impactful, because I don't think they had really talked to many Irish Catholics before. And I was the kind of guy that I like to do research. I like to study the history. And I would have conversations with them. And I feel like I definitely swayed their perspective to help understand our plight, so to speak, right? The Irish people's plight in Ireland, and how things were really hard for us and very, very uneven. And all we really wanted was an opportunity. And I'd get into conversations with them. I'd say silly things like, hey, you guys virtually worship this guy, King William of Orange. And it's like, you have to help me understand, so this guy was a Dutch guy, and over in the north of Ireland, around Belfast, they'd have, statues of this guy, William of Orange, with like Union flags, they'd have these British flags like all around the guy, the curbs painted, like it was kind of crazy overkill for their British nationalism. And a lot of times it would be around statues of this guy, William of Orange. And then it was like, the guy was Dutch. So he invaded England, killed the King of England, and then kept going into Ireland. And you guys like worship this guy with all these British flags, but the guy was Dutch. I don't, you have to explain that one to me. And what's funny is one of the guys didn't even know that. He didn't even know that William of Orange, this guy that they had kind of venerated, was not even English. So that kind of helped open his perspective a wee bit. So just by having those conversations, and at no point, if anything, it probably helped me to become a little bit more solidified when you have conversations like that and you go away and you study and you learn. And the more I learned about Irish history, the more I really believed having a united Ireland is the best scenario. To have this wee island separated, 26 counties on one side, 6 counties on another, it just seemed stupid, and divisive. And I felt like if we just got rid of that border, we would eventually start getting along. And at least our children would, and eventually it would just be bred out of us, and then unification would be bred into our children as they were growing up, instead of the segregation that was going on in Ireland, and to a certain degree still goes on in the northern area. So it's kind of crazy that my own community would have turned on me for trying to promote our cause. And I find similar things that when I'm going on these mission trips, so to speak, let's just call them that, most of the people that I actually help when I go on these mission trips are people from the left, liberal, progressives, and it's not, I think part of the reason why is because a lot of conservative Christians, they're usually part of a church. So when a disaster happens, churches usually try to bond together, and they go out and they try to find out if people in their community are doing okay and whatever else, and they try to take care of each other. A lot of liberals, they don't. A lot of people on the left don't have communities like that, so they get isolated. So when guys like me go to places like North Carolina or Texas or wherever I go, it tends to be a lot of the liberal people that we end up helping. And all I ask of them is that, hey, we just want to let you know that God loves you. You have that conversation. Why are you here? All this kind of stuff. It's like, well, in this moment, I think that we're here to help you get this done, get this tree off your roof, get you back into your house, get your car up and running again, get you fuel, get you a generator, whatever it was that we needed to do to help these people. I believe in that moment that we're here to help you. And all that I ask is that you let me tell you that God loves you, and he loves you so much that he sent his only son, Jesus the Christ, to die for you. And he rose from the dead to wash away all your sins, that you could spend an eternity with heaven. And if you believe in Jesus, you can be with God for eternity. And that's it. It's just me planting the seed, and God does the rest. But I have to plant that seed. And I don't have a litmus test. I don't like, hey, I'm not going to help you unless you're a Christian. In fact, if anything, and this is the irony of it again, is that when we go into these areas to help these people, I would almost rather be going to help a person from the opposite side of the belief system, so that I can witness to that person and show them some goodwill, show them some of that God's love that God so desperately wants to sow into their lives, but they're resistant to it. So here I have an opportunity to do that. Now, here's what's kind of crazy, is trying to have some of these conversations, and where some of the people in my community have got upset, is when I go away, I see these big organizations, and there's a couple in particular that I have grown to almost hate, because of the way that they operate. I feel like it's really almost criminal would be the accusation of what they're doing. It's almost criminal. Some of the things I literally witnessed were pretty bad, and even through into other organizations that I wouldn't consider criminal, but I would consider complacent. So some of the big Christian organizations that I've witnessed, I've witnessed things that I don't understand. And what tends to happen is Christians are very, very generous. Americans are very, very generous. So Americans donate about $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year. So I want to ask you, when you look around, do you see what you think is about $1 trillion worth of aid filtering into your communities and helping people? Because I sure don't. So where does it go? Well, here's a couple of things that I found very interesting when I go away. Is when I went to Ukraine, I feel like they did it as close to perfection as what I've seen. They're still off in a couple of areas, in my opinion, but they just had a really good way of doing things. In America, it's been kind of interesting trying to reorientate people doing things into the right pattern, the right manner. So you get a large organization that gets donations from churches, and then they receive all that money. They usually have like a big central warehouse. They have all this fancy equipment, trucks, everything. So a certain amount of that money goes into administration costs, because they have all this overhead, so to speak, right? Then if a disaster happens, they've got to get it out of their warehouses and to the area to get set up. So sometimes they can be a wee bit late to the game because the roads are closed or whatever the case is. Whereas local churches, they don't have the same issues. So I'm going to try to talk about what I see as the problem, and then what I see as the fix. And then you tell me if the truth that I'm telling right now is offensive. If you find it offensive, or if you can get behind me and try to help me figure out how we get this information out so that we can be more efficient and more effective. That's the whole reason why I'm saying this, is to be more effective. That's the only goal. I'm not trying to call people out. I'm just trying to be more effective at getting the gospel out. So out of that $1 trillion a year that's donated, a really significant amount of it is donated by Christians. So Christians are donating all this money. And in many cases, maybe it's even up to that full amount, right? So that are being donated. So what I see is that items are donated and money is donated. I don't ever get to see the money aspect of it, so I don't really know much about that. But when it comes to the items or whatever, maybe some of the stuff that money purchases, is in some places like North Carolina and even in Texas to a certain degree as well, people were just bundling mountains of supplies. And what I've seen is in apple crates. An apple crate is essentially a 4x4x4 cubes crate, and you just fill the thing up. And they were taking it to parking lots and dropping it off in park lots, or even in some cases street corners, gas stations. I mean, anywhere where people could congregate or get in easily to pick the stuff up. But here's what was happening a lot. They drop the crates off and then they take off. And then in some cases where we kind of lingered a wee bit, we could see cars pulling up, and they go through the crate and they would essentially pull out everything that still had a tag on it, and they load it up in their car. So there's a couple of situations I got into arguments with women who were essentially just going through and taking everything that was brand new and loading up the car. So this one couple of ladies in North Carolina had loaded their car with about 30 blankets. And I experienced almost exactly the same thing in Rockport, Texas. And in both situations, the women got aggressive with me. So they got aggressive because they were like, hey, this is our stuff. This was donated to us. And we're like, no, this was donated to this church for them to give out as they see fit. So it wasn't donated to you, it was donated to the church, but yet they're arguing. And in one case, the women were like pushing, like they were trying to get physical with us to get the stuff because we were blocking them from getting the supplies because they had more than enough that they needed. And we already suspected because we went online and we seen a lot of the stuff that we were given on sale on Craigslist and, Marketplace and stuff like that. So it is not a good scenario for people to donate money and supplies and then see it be wasted and not given out. And here's the worst part. The worst part is there wasn't even any gospel given with this stuff. So much of what people had donated and given away, there wasn't even a gospel message that went with it. And this is what I want to change. I want to change that culture. I want to change the culture where people show up to a church that's being established, they get the gospel message, then they get some food, and then they get to go and get some needed items, and that we control it. But it's under the auspice of this is not our stuff. This belongs to somebody else, and it would be really wrong for us just to allow people to come and take like dozens of blankets or load up in all the supplies and just no gospel message, no oversight, not being a good steward of what other people has blessed us with. I want to build an organization that essentially has chapters, and the chapters are supplied and supported so that the materials are there locally, so that we don't have these big bloated warehouses. We don't have all this overhead trying to get the stuff to different areas. If you're in an area that has, issues with fires, anything fire related goes there. If you're in an issue that gets really cold weather, anything cold related gets there. Hurricanes, tornadoes, you get those type of supplies, so that we can deal it out to people in such a way where it has the greatest benefit to bring the gospel. So that's what I'm trying to achieve. And what really sucks is I'm just trying to be honest in certain situations. I can't tell the truth about Ukraine. I can't tell the truth about what I experienced in Israel. I can't really tell the truth in some cases of what I experienced here in America because of the way that people will get offended and then want to come at me. But we have to tell the truth in order to make it better. And that's what iron sharpens iron. When we sharpen each other, we become better. And if you're a person that's donating money to some charitable organization, I'm convinced you probably want this to go to the right people and not end up in, with 30 other blankets in the back of somebody's car that ends up on Craigslist. So that's my goal. And I'm going to try to keep pushing the limits of introducing more truth of the experiences that I had so that we can start building a better system that doesn't have the bloat, that gets to people directly, and most importantly, that is given in Jesus' name. So that's what I'm trying to achieve. So, hey, leave a comment. I get a lot of comments. I get a lot of shade from Christians even telling me I shouldn't be on this channel. I'm promoting fear, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to build something that brings God glory. And if we're prepared, then we're not worried about ourselves. We're able to get out there into the field to bring in the harvest. So leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And if you're another person who's done disaster relief and you've had some experiences, let me know. Let me know what experiences you had, because in the end, let me know if you feel there's a way we could do it better. So thank you. God bless you guys. Take care.